The Bodmer oak, Fontainebleau Forest, was painted by Claude Monet in 1865. The foliage suggests that this work, in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was painted in October. Although Monet is best known as an impressionist, Bodmer oak evidences a method of translating nature into art that might be more accurately described as naturalism. This work evidences Monet's artistic method of painting directly in nature and transforming that perception of landscape into painting. Bodmer oak is initially an unassuming painting. For viewers familiar with Monet's later work and the history of modernist art, this painting may not seem as radical today as it was in 1865. However, in the middle of the 19th century, French painters were expected to study in Paris art academies and to learn their craft by making copies of old master paintings in the Louvre. In fact, Monet did attend a Paris studio run by the academic painter Charles Gleyre. In Gleyre's academy, Monet met Frederic Bazille, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and Alfred Sisley. These artists would join Monet in developing the Impressionist method. Whenever possible, Monet sought to escape from Gleyre's academy and to paint in nature. Monet was committed to painting en plein air, which means in the open air. Accompanied by Bazille, Renoir, and Sisley, Monet made several trips in the mid-1860s to the forest of Fontainebleau. Fontainebleau offered an alternative studio to Paris, a studio in which nature was the teacher. Part of the artistic attraction of Fontainebleau Forest was its celebrated place in the history of 19th century French landscape painting. Fontainebleau was a popular location for painters such as Camille Corot and Gustave Courbet. Looking at examples of their art, we can trace a development of landscape painting that was foundational for Monet's early work. In 1832 or 1833, Corot made a small painting of a massive tree in the forest of Fontainebleau. He painted this work directly in nature. In 1835, Corot incorporated this tree into a large studio painting depicting the Genesis narrative of Hagar in the wilderness. Today, these two paintings hang together in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. In constructing Hagar in the wilderness, Corot transplanted the tree from a study that contextualized it in a real forest to a painting that imagined the desert of Palestine. Corot translated the oak from nature into art. Although Corot would be an inspiration for Monet, the younger painter would not engage in this sort of imposition of artistic imagination onto nature. Monet said, "I have always had an abhorrence of theories. My only virtue is to have painted directly from nature." Corot and Monet were both transforming landscape into painting. However, their methods were different. In Hagar in the wilderness, Corot designed a composition for his painting and then inserted the tree that he had observed in nature into that composition. In Bodmer oak, Monet studied nature and found a point of view within the landscape that provided the painting's compositional structure. Monet's success in translating the observation of landscape into painting lay in his ability to see structure in nature. By depicting nature at certain moments, from certain points of view, and with a particular application of paint, Monet was able to translate the observation of nature into a compositional structure that was pictorially inclusive of the viewer. Monet's painting was done in the outdoors, en plein air. Being painted directly in front of the subject gave Monet's work an authenticity as a true record of a specific experience of the world. While painting done in the outdoors, especially doing studies in the outdoors, was a practice with a long history, Monet was one of the first painters to make this a consistent method. painting directly in nature was necessary for Monet's project of translating landscape into painting. The revolutionary character of Monet's art is sometimes misunderstood as simply winning acceptance for sketches made in the outdoors as an appropriate replacement for the more finished painting done in the studio. There was more at stake here. When Corot made sketches outdoors and then took these studies back into the studio, he then proceeded to impose ideas about what painting should be onto what he had actually studied in nature. Bodmer Oak challenges this approach to landscape painting. Corot's painting implies that the viewer is an observer of a scene in which he or she is not a participant. Monet's painting more carefully implicates the viewer. In this work, Monet describes the light filtering through the trees and across the grass with such visual immediacy that the viewer has a sense of being in the same time and place with the tree. Corot's painting of the mighty tree places the viewer before nature. Monet's painting sets the viewer in the forest. Gustave Courbet's The Fringe of the Forest evidences a method that was closer to that of Monet. If Corot's Hagar in the Wilderness is a historical landscape, Courbet painted contemporary landscapes. Courbet, who was the leading artist of the realist movement, famously said, "Show me an angel and I'll paint one." While many of the individual elements of Corot's painting may have been studied from nature, the final painting was an invention of the artist's imagination. Courbet proposed an approach to painting in which the artist was not the imaginer of other worlds, but rather the critical observer of his or her own world. Courbet's painting demonstrates his capacity to translate the surfaces of nature into the texture of paint. Standing before Courbet's painting, one has a visceral sense of the dense materiality of the natural world. A key difference between Monet's method of naturalism and Courbet's method of realism was highlighted by a meeting of the two painters. Courbet found Monet sitting before a canvas, in the outdoors, watching his subject, but not painting. After some time had passed, and Monet had still not begun to paint, Courbet inquired why Monet wasn't painting. Monet explained that he was waiting for the right light. For Monet, it was not enough simply to be in the presence of his subject. He could only paint when there was a particular light effect. The entire painting had to be made in the same state of light. When these light conditions changed, Monet had to stop painting and wait for them to return. Looking at Courbet's The Fringe of the Forest, we have a sense of nature as real and not idealized or romanticized. Nevertheless, in Courbet's painting, we are situated as viewers outside of the painting and separate from the landscape. Monet painted nature as an observer present in that particular time and place. Corot and Courbet's subjects do not exist outside of time and place. However, their paintings also do not evidence a consciousness of a specific time and place that we see in Monet's Bodmer Oak. Corot and Courbet may have painted before nature, but Monet painted in nature. Claude Monet's Bodmer Oak is part of a group of paintings in which he was finding his own method of landscape painting. Monet's method of naturalism, and later Impressionism, was distinct from both Corot's history painting and Courbet's realism. Bodmer Oak evidences Monet's process of observing nature and translating that perception into painting.